This is Linux in Laws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever else fancies your tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy, Mum? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back on a speaker in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35, or any pets, including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusted guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs. Welcome to Linux in Laws, Season 2, Episode 13. Martin, how are things?
Yeah, welcome, Mr. Tracking Point, XS1.
Inside joke.
Things are fine, thank you. How are you? Have you been released into the wild again yet? So?
Absolutely. Okay. Whatever the wild is, anyway.
Glad to hear.
It's not about a show about about the wild, but far from it, but rather about open source. And Martin, what's the subject?
Tonight's subject is, well, we've had a bit of a series about this, or we are having a bit of a series about this, about the use of open source in various, let's say, industries, right? And tonight's episode is about the use of open source in the military space.
But I think before we go into the details, probably we should be setting the scene with regards to, because probably many people will ask the question, why is open source used in military, and why doesn't the open source movement, in inverted commas, whatever that is in particular, do anything about it?
Okay, good question. What do you mean by the open source movement doesn't do anything about it?
In terms of some people using and, of course, advocating open source might be under the impression that open source and military technology doesn't mix.
Yes, yeah, okay.
From a peace perspective, as in peace movement perspective, they probably have a point. But on the other side, we have an accepted definition of what open source really is.
Indeed.
And of course, links will be in the show notes. The Open Source Initiative, also affectionately known as the OSI, has about 6 or 7 or maybe 8 rules, I can't remember the number of them, that clearly specify what open source software is and isn't. And as a matter of fact, number 6 says, no discrimination against fields of endeavor. The license must not restrict anyone from making use of the field of endeavor. So that means a piece of software, once it's adhering to these principles, is free even for military usage.
Yeah, well, in short, there are no restrictions, right? That's the idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That which clearly qualifies it as it is in that case.
Yeah, it's a principle, right? It's either it's unrestricted, or you start adding a bunch of stuff. Then, yeah. No, I thought you were going to. I thought you were going to mention the fact that people are worried about security and open source, that kind of area, but clearly it's more the other way around, right? I think you have an example of a commercial communications tool that didn't do so well.
Yes, we're going to go into that in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Before we go there.
Can we name them?
Yes, we can in a minute
or
so.
Fair enough. All right.
It's all about the storyline and the drama effect, so we keep the best for last. Anyway, okay. Maybe we should we'll start with the general case and then work ourselves towards the more specific ones. Okay. It's probably fair to say that, especially given Linux, probably it's fair to say that any real-time embedded Linux system is just game for the usage in advanced weaponry, for example.
Yeah. You mean not your old Colt 45, yeah?
No. No. So quite a few weapon manufacturers actually take open source software, and Linux would probably be the prime example here, and turn this into a guiding system to be used with the weaponry as such.
Yeah, obviously Linux plus associated programs to do the the navigation and the tracking and the guidance pieces.
Yes, exactly.
But yes, underlying obviously there's the OS of choice for embedded systems, indeed.
Yes. So why real if it's already out there, more or less? And on top of Linux, of course, you have guidance systems in terms of your software that already does the image recognition, all the rest of it. So it's just a matter of compiling or assembling these resources to give you more or less a precision weaponry system based on more or less open source components.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember. Sorry, actually, yes. It's the name of the company is, bear with me for a moment.
Company?
Yes, it's a startup about 10, 12, 15 years ago.
Okay.
And it's called Tracking Point, if memory serves correct, and they make an actual precision rifle that is based on open source components, namely Linux.
Okay. So what's the purpose of this device?
Essentially, a commercially available rifle pimped with open source components to give you precision, what they call it, a precision-guided firearm. In terms of a semi/fully automatic rifle with a full-blown vision system on top of it that basically leaves probably, and I'm not a weapon expert, no questions unanswered in terms of no requests unanswered. In terms of it's pretty much there if you want to kill people with precision. Let's put it this way.
Okay. It's yes, fair enough. I mean, that's but yeah, the tracking and guidance systems are widely used on for a long time on tanks and on boats, right? Because these are clearly far superior to what any human can ever do. The speed of the decision making is just milliseconds compared to well, it's an order of magnitude quicker than any human can do. Yeah. I mean, this is already happening.
Yes.
Happening even in the. There's a lot of talk about the computer gaming space where all that freely available open source software can be used to outperform any human player. It's this is where, but yeah, clearly the military is an area where everything is being modernized like everything else. Gone are the days of people with just a single rifle. Yeah, that's no longer how it works.
And as we all know, computer-based games are not too far away from military usage. If history is anything to go by, just take a look at Doom 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right?
Oh, I thought you were going to mention War Games or whatever it was called.
Oh, that's ancient, Martin.
Defcon 5. That's quite funny, though. Yeah. There we go.
No, I mean, just take a look at the whole field of ego shooters, open source or not.
Yeah.
It's there, right? So.
Yeah. So yes, so the whole kind of guidance part is one piece, right? There's you mentioned the tracking point people. There's an Android-based device that all the U.S. military walk around with to point to targets and communicate them back. It's all in general, if you can, as we know with open source, we can build any kind of solution, and you can clearly do that a lot cheaper, more effective, more secure than any closed source system, right?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, so anyway, this device is called an ATAC, if you're interested.
Links may or may not be in the show notes, I suppose.
Okay.
Do you know of what components did they use to assemble this? or manufactured.
Well, it's pretty much an Android tablet / phone with military casing type stuff and some apps running on it. That's all it is. But it's the same similar as, I don't know how much you come across this, but there is war relies a lot on communication, right? So there are also like mobile data centers that are military spec hardened and all that kind of stuff, right? It's not just put a server in a box. It's clearly an important part of warfare. So you have to make that more secure, more bulletproof, that kind of stuff, and power supplies, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
So the base is what I'm hearing, actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a hardened AOSP, as an Android open source project operations as a base, plus then proprietary apps on top, I suppose, because I reckon you wouldn't find the source code offset apps on GitHub.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, there are. If you think about the Ukraine stuff, right? Ukraine and war. The Ukraine use a lot of drones in their warfare for recon, for attacks. I guess everybody does these days. Even the people blowing up the ships in near Africa. I remember the name of them. But anyway,
I think so.
Yes, very good. Yeah. But yes, there are open source projects to run drones, right? So there is anything device you can imagine there is an open source option for, and clearly they can be used for many purposes that are related to warfare. But even your ordinary phone, right? Again in Ukraine, as part of the clearly being invaded is not much fun. So anybody that
Martin, it isn't. Especially if you're against that.
I can't imagine many people are in favor. Yeah. But yeah. So nowadays everybody has a phone. So why not use Telegram to communicate? Let your ordinary people communicate if they see a rogue Russian running around, or more than one, and that obviously makes your whole country a weapon of intelligence, right?
The question begs, of course, isn't Telegram a Russian provided service?
That is a good question. Yeah. Well, there are alternatives, right? So, as we know.
I think the company is incorporated on Cyprus or something, or maybe even the Near East. I can't remember.
Okay.
But I think, and needless to say, people, if you have more precise knowledge, please, the email address is feedback@linguist.eu. But I think the founders were actually of Russian origin.
They were. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But obviously, there's also Matrix and things like that you can use for these purposes.
Absolutely. So, is Matrix being used in the Ukraine warfare? Do you know?
No, the main main thing that's been reported is these Telegram, really, by the normal people, and but the thing about having a smartphone is you can take pictures, you can take audio, you can do you have your GPS coordinates, so it's just if you have everybody in the country providing all this information, right, you can very easily pinpoint enemy movements and locations that way.
And this is what the civilian population in the Ukraine does. So as soon as they see the enemy advancing, whether this is known to Kiev as a military intelligence or not, they simply take a picture, send that to a server, and then Kiev has a better and better and better picture of what's going on, even beyond their fronts.
Mm-hmm. Talking about pictures, I mean, I don't know if you remember in the beginnings of that war, there was a lot of.
Martin, this is 30 years ago. How do you think I can remember?
Well, which year are we in now? Sorry, I lost track.
Don't worry about it. No, jokes aside, people. We are still recording this in 2025. Sorry, 2026. 2024. I stand corrected.
So the med's not working again.
It's about, sorry, we shouldn't laugh about this. Ukrainians, who's listening, we do apologize. The war is way too old in terms of it has been going for 2+ years, and there's a laughing stock, of course, no laughing matter. Sorry, and any day spent at war is a day too much, just to be straight here, sorry.
Yeah, agreed. Yes, anyway, so going back to the story about pictures, there are so many satellites these days floating around, commercial ones, non-commercial ones, European ones, and a lot of that data is also open source. The European Space Agency, for example, open sourced many years of data that is available for people to analyze things like, what is the impact of the environment and what is the impact on forestry and all these kind of things, right? You can obviously track that over time very easily with satellite images. But there are also the military applications of this, which is like tracking a column of Russian tanks, which means that if you know where they are, you can blow them up.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't just limit itself to software, right? It's about open sourcing information in a way as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and given the fact, that you have many open source components readily available, for example, OpenCV, which is a Python code-base, of course, does allow you to detect an image with pretty much very good precision. Never mind, if you couple this with a deep learning framework, you pretty much have the piece of technology, and of course they're all open source, at your disposal to do some pretty sophisticated stuff.
Yeah, you can train this to recognize tanks and
exactly. The trouble is, of course, it doesn't come in real time. So if you want to win the war with that over the next weekend, there might be certain issues with QA.
You say that, but it's object recognition in real time is pretty straightforward with things like YOLO. That's very quick. But yeah, you would have to tune that model for specific. You don't just want to know if it's a tank. You want to know it's a Russian tank, right? And which model?
Yes, especially so that you don't shoot or attack NATO tanks. And just wait behind the Polish border. Friendly fire is not an option here, right? Ukraine. Sorry, that's not really on. But jokes aside, yes, the components are there, but incorporating that into your workflow might be harder than originally anticipated, because this is something that you don't do overnight or over the weekend.
Oh no, for sure. I've had some conversations work-related with various countries' defense organizations which want to modernize, but then they still want to have a person at the end to say, do something. They want faster decision making, but they also want to not have complete automation of these things.
Unfortunately, Martin can't go into the details.
No.
Let's suffice it to say, Martin is recording this from his Caribbean hideout, sponsored by some unknown companies.
Indeed.
No, jokes aside. Okay, but I think before we go into more details, we should probably actually take a trip down memory lane.
Oh.
Yes, Martin, your call. I know, but anyway, no, there's an important government agency actually that powered a lot of open source projects.
You mean DARPA?
Yes, indeed, very much so. Known as ARPA, as in the Advanced Research Project Agency, going back to the 60s now. The idea
for defense,
exactly. The idea behind this Department of Defense spin-off was essentially to create a breeding ground for really advanced tech, and it was renamed to Defense advanced research project agency in, I think, 72 as in last century. But this was essentially the foundation for projects such as Multics.
Okay.
And Multics, as probably the very old people, as in people older than Martin and myself, know, was actually an operating system, or still is, because I think the last stable version dates back to last year, so you can still download it because it is open source. You can still download it from a website and you can just compile it. But it laid the foundation for many similar operating systems going forward. Unix probably would be the best example.
Yeah, fair enough.
Unix, of course, wasn't open source, but Linux closely modeled on Unix. Linus, if you're listening, this is my interpretation of matters.
So wait a minute. Who did the first commercial Unix then?
That was AT&T, System 5.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I lost track.
Needless to say, AT&T was also a project member, if I'm completely mistaken, of the Multics project. So were many other companies. Okay. The idea behind ARPA or DARPA was then to pour money into industry to fund projects, pretty much like the EU did about 20, 30 years ago with their DG, Direction Générale 13 and other project or organizations, as in you take a little bit of cash, you put in the industry, you scope the whole thing, and you reap the benefits. And the idea is basically to create some pretty sophisticated stuff. And Multics probably would be the best example because, as I said, Unix was closely modeled on it. And quite a few other operating systems like Plan 9 and Ultimate Linux came out of it as well. But even these days, they're doing some pretty amazing stuff. For example, they're doing a project called Fine Exploits to Thwart Tampering, which exactly led to something called Enclaves, as developed by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, affectionately known as an MIT. I'm almost tempted to say, basically, this is where Intel took a leaf of their book in terms of how they came up with CPU enclaves as in closely modeled, secure execution environments for programs.
Okay.
And it all goes back exactly. It all goes back to DARPA originally. But they also published an open catalog, as they called it, of their open source code bases, because at the end of the day, it's funded by the American taxpayer, ultimately anyhow. But unfortunately, this went offline around 2022 or 2021. So it's no longer available. And I don't know the rationale behind is why they took this offline. But about 10 years ago, it was all the rage if current research is anything to go by. And I mean, the latest, I wouldn't say shenanigans, but the DoD, and of course, probably we shouldn't mention actually a small unknown network called ARPANET in the context of DARPA.
Yeah.
So, Martin, what do you know about ARPANET?
Well, it was clearly, so I think most people will be familiar with this, to be fair. But
I reckon the majority of the people on the planet use them on a daily basis.
Well, yeah, but yes and no. It had a different name, right? ARPANET was obviously the predecessor of the internet, but which actually stands for some agency network, right? So it's the first packet switch network to use TCP/IP.
It stands for ARPA network. And yes, it's a packet switched network using TCP/IP. That's exactly
it. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
Exactly. So you could say actually that the modern internet is closely modeled on something called ARPANET.
Yeah, indeed. So but this is the point, right, of an organization like that, is that you pour money into something, but you also give it clearly defense is an important topic that people want to focus on rather than their cat pictures. So money plus incentive means that there's lots of innovation going on there for sure.
Of course, the Department of Defense still uses a lot of open source software these days.
They do.
And as a matter of fact, actually, there's a working group called MIL-OSS, and of course the details within the show notes, where actually people have gathered within the DoD to promote the usage of open source beyond DARPA.
Well, that's kind of a bit more in the US, but this is also happening in Europe, right? With NATO has a similar kind of working group. Again, they focus on using open source as much as possible and find applications for it.
Interesting indeed.
Indeed. So but apart from your obviously military applications, all these they all rely on. You could argue that you need some bespoke cryptography to do communications, but for most of the standard stuff, they'll use all the open source, OpenSSL and stuff like that to
why reinvent
secure
the wheel? Exactly.
So again, these it's the same in every. In that way, it's the same in every organization, right? They have government organization. They have budgets, and which they can spend. So why not spend it on open source software and make the use of the collective?
Well, you see, it does make sense. On the other side, you don't have a grassroots movement just promoting the use of open source software in military defense technology, because most of the time, because of the origins, it would be funded by the government, of course.
Yes,
as in governments. I mean, unless you happen to live in the US, where you have militias who apparently are still suffering from budget constraints, though.
Yeah.
So the amount of funding you would get from your own militia might be quite confined in terms of limited.
Mm-hmm.
Budding open source developers looking for funding, you probably want to go to the government to your local government directly, and don't bother with the militias in the first place. Just a word of advice.
That sounds very sensible. Yeah.
But jokes aside, okay. Anything else we should talk about in an open source context for military deployment?
Well, we talked about the sort of the first point of contact by identifying and locating and tracking things like that. But then clearly there is the communications piece as well, right? So, okay, how are you going to communicate your secure documents, for example, right? So you're gone are the days of and with documents, obviously, it's not just text; it's also images and things like that. Images, videos, whatever you want, you need to communicate back from the battlefield, right? Are you going to use? Again, there are then options. You need secure messaging, right? So, what is secure and reliable messaging?
Absolutely.
And the answer is
open source technology comes to mind,
like RabbitMQ, right? For example, yeah. So
yes. Martin, it does. Keep going. Keep talking.
No, but yeah. So that is the second phase, right? You need to securely communicate and reliably communicate these messages back to your command center. Encryption is part of that, but yes, the whole fact that messages have to be delivered, no matter what circumstances or what communications are being breached. This is the type of things that RabbitMQ can do, right? You have guaranteed delivery or redelivery if it hasn't been. So if you have communications failures, things like that. So again, just an open source project that can play an important part in that whole scenario. Clearly, then, we mentioned the whole imagery piece. Then, what are you going to do with? There are the front end projects or models like OpenCV, as you mentioned, and YOLO and things like that to do all these kind of things. But then, okay, you also need to store it against reference data. So what do you need then? You need a vector database, which there are commercial variants, but clearly Postgres being Postgres has made these kind of additions as well available in an open source context. So it's just that innovation happens right in open source as fast as you need it. So it's not restricted to any. You don't need to spend a ton of money on specific. I need a military vector database. You just use plain old Postgres, and Postgres has built vector extensions, and you can use that instead.
Yeah, there we go. Of course, the beauty about open source is basically that there are many, many more alternatives to choose from. So you're not confined when it comes down to the vector database just to Postgres. So Redis has a vector extension as well.
But it's not a database, right? So
quite a few people may tend to disagree, Martin. Anyway,
I know. Anyway, let's not go. It's not a podcast about Redis. Yeah.
Back to server grounds.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Redis has vector extensions. Yes, indeed.
You spoke about messaging. I grant you that RabbitMQ is a viewing system. Fair enough. But if it comes down to planet-wide scaling, I don't think that RabbitMQ does, because quite a few governments and Germany, I think in addition to France, I may stand corrected on the second one, have resorted to Matrix for their prime infrastructure for military secure communication. For example, there's
clearly Matrix is more than just a messaging system, right? So,
absolutely, you can send your cat videos too.
Yes. You can send your cat pictures with RabbitMQ, but they'll just end up as a bunch of bytes, right?
That's precisely the point. Yes. No, Matrix has a very important feature, and I'm not sure about RabbitMQ without extensions, because Matrix does do federation right off the box. Whereas in RabbitMQ, I think you can tweak it, yes, but it's
no. RabbitMQ can federate messages as well. Yeah, that's not. But it's Matrix is more of a one level higher than a RabbitMQ. RabbitMQ is the transport, right?
That's precisely it. Yes. And the irony of it all, actually, there's a very kind of prominent project that comes to mind. The German, I don't know how much the German government has poured taxpayers' money into a project called BW Messenger, as in a secure messaging infrastructure used for secure communication globally based on Matrix. They do their own servers. The source code on top of Matrix is open source. Details, if I can dig them up, will be in the show notes. But the irony of it all, actually, that the word has yet to spread about the usage of said service, because in February, I think it was, of 2024, some high-rank Air Force generals discussed the usage of a missile system called Taurus for the deployment in the Ukraine using a commercially available service called WebEx. WebEx, of course, being not matrix-based, but proprietary software.
Ancient.
Well, that's your interpretation. Anyway, long story short, some Russian intelligence, we're going to leave it at that with regards to level of detail, managed to hack into that conversation and leaked this discussion about 2 weeks later in Russian media.
Okay. In Russian media?
Yes. needless to say, where many news agencies as an outlets picked it up and made a real fun story out of it with regards to really showing Germany how it's not done.
Okay.
Needless to say, the German government did a lot to kind of retract the whole thing in terms of it wasn't classified information that they discussed. Fair enough. But the whole thing, of course, had a political angle because Taurus allows you to basically deploy weaponry reaching far into Russian territory. So I think the minimum distance or the average distance, I'm not a military expert. I'm just listening to what is portrayed in the media, but Taurus is at least capable of traveling about 1,500 kilometers or miles or something like this. So if you launch this,
500, I think. Yeah.
if you
Anyway,
launch this in the Ukraine, it has the potential to go far into Russian territory. And this is the reason why Germany has been quite reluctant to deploy Taurus and the Taurus missiles in the Ukraine. But the discussion, if the Russian footage is anything to go by, detail quite a lot of how to do this. Which, of course, in the whole political light of this whole shebang, shenanigans, whatever you want to call it, it's not great. So, German military, if you listen to the podcast, I'm sure quite a few people will do so.
Is not Olaf involved in all this as well?
No, he's not German military. He's just the chancellor, so no knows what there. So, German military, just resort to BW Messenger. It's at your disposal, apparently.
Matrix, yeah.
No, it's just. I mean, apparently they have an app for iOS, Android, and the ordinary web browser. So you just have to use it, right? You don't have to use WebEx for that sort of discussion. The beauty about the BW Messenger is actually it's at your disposal. It's free of charge, and it's secure.
Nice.
So no
By the way,
Russians in the future. I hope.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? For everybody's sake.
Indeed.
Anyway, talking about Germans, do you know what the military counterintelligence service is called in German?
MAD, yes.
Yes. Or MAD in short.
Yes, Militärische Abschirmdienst. Yes, that's exactly it. Nothing to do with the magazine of same name.
No? Okay.
No.
Who knows?
I do.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay. Excellent. Anything else before we go to the epoxies, Mr. Visser?
No, that sounds like a very good summary.
Excellent. So, military or not, keep using open source. You're far better off, as the Taurus debacle shows you.
Is that Germany or is that WebEx? Yes.
So anyway. I'm not, Martin, I'm just talking about fuck ups. In terms of if you want to want fuck up, your next fuck up is just use a different technology as an open source, especially if it's at your disposal.
Indeed. But then why didn't they? Anyway, back to the boxes. Yeah.
Talking points or stuff for another episode, I suppose. Yes, German. If you want to go public about these shenanigans in terms of what drove you to WebEx, the email address is feedback@linuxinlaws.eu.
Yes.
Just get clearance first, just in case. Anyway, onto the boxes, Mr. Visser. What's your box?
Oh, I have a few. Which one to choose?
Max yourself out.
Yeah. Well, I'll go with a online coding platform which I recently came across, and it's quite fun. Nothing to do with open source. Well, having said that, you can use it in any language, but
it's not called Copilot, is it?
No. It's called CodeCamp.
Yes, I heard about this.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you can choose the language of your choice and do many different challenges just to kind of refresh yourselves on algorithms and things and see how they work in different languages. And for your information, you can do it in Rust as well.
No, much more importantly, do they support brainfuck?
Don't know.
Okay. What about Algol 60?
Algol 60? Oh,
yes.
68. I'm only familiar with 68. Sorry, I don't know anything about...
No, Algol 60 would be the predecessor of 68.
Yeah, I'm not that old, sorry. But I mean, if Algol is kind of the predecessor to Pascal anyway, so it's just a functional language.
Okay.
It is. Did you not notice? I thought you went to uni.
Since when is Pascal a functional language?
Since it was invented?
No.
Yes, it is.
Pascal doesn't support lambdas, for starters.
Well, that doesn't make it not a functional language.
Oh, Martin, it does.
No.
I mean, what's a functional language without anonymous functions? I'm wondering. Okay, jury.
You don't have to be anonymous to be a function. What are you talking about?
No, Pascal doesn't support function pointers. At least not in the original specification. Jury, if you're out there, the email is jury@linuxinlaws.eu.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, onto my box.
Yes.
Slightly more neutral. Let's put it this way. It's a movie called Spectral.
Movie called what?
Spectral. It's about 8 years old. We are recording this in 2024. It goes back to 2016, and I won't spoil the plot. But suffice it to say, it's an action-packed military sci-fi movie, and DARPA does feature in it. And that's precisely...
Oh, do a lot of aliens get blown up or something?
Not aliens, but I'm not spoiling the fun here. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Many people get blown up. Okay.
Or something, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're into that sort of thing, you don't want to miss this. Details, of course, within the show notes.
No exploding aliens. Okay, fair enough. Okay, excellent.
Quite a few things will explode, but we're going to leave it at that.
All right. Good stuff.
And with that, people, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
This is the Linux In-Laws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license, type attribution share alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for their song Solid Market, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under CC at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts.